After the World Trade Center was completed, the word got out that my company was experts on building security. So I called up everybody I can think of, engineering firms and associations in New York, and I got a call from the Real Estate Board of New York, the most powerful real estate organization whose members are made up of the 200 largest builders in New York. They're not made up of homeowners. They're made up of Donald Trump and his son-in-law kind of companies, and that's the Real Estate Board of New York. They're the ones that negotiate labor disputes with the wages for the elevator operators or whatever. They are it. So they're going to run. I suggested when they called me that if I can speak at some seminar. I said, well, let me run the seminar for you. I'll do it for a fee. And they said, fine. You set it up, and which they taught me, because you have to have a good name to run a seminar. It can't be a Charlie Schnabolk seminar. It could be General Motors seminar, and Charlie Schnabolk a feature speaker, meaning you got to have a sponsor that carries some reputation that shows the justification for running such a seminar. So the Real Estate Board was outstanding. And here's who were the speakers. I had to get all the speakers. I did all the planning. I did the whole thing. And I had if you see on the front page, there's a picture of me and their monthly magazine, and the head of the FBI office in New York, the chief of police of the Port Authority, and the assistant commissioner of the police department. I mean, I really got the best. And what you do is you just go up to their office and ask them, and which I'm going to talk about later, how I took advantage of it. And they gave me to run this seminar. It was in a big hotel on 42nd Street, the Hyatt. It's called now, but it was a different name then. And we had about 60, 70 people in the board. They were paying like $500 a piece. I didn't realize $15,000, and they would. I did it for. I think my fee was about $5,000, but it was based on how many we got there. That was the maximum I could get. But I realized there's money in these damn seminars if you have the right speakers and the right promotional. Because I did all the work, they did nothing, and we got these 300 people. Now what happened? It sort of backfired, but it was very good for me, but not for the Real Estate Board. In other words, any publicity, even if it's bad, is good when you're starting out in business, because people will forget why they heard of you, or remember they heard of you. It's a true story. So what they did is they had the seminar. It was an all day from 9 o'clock to 5, and one of them I invited the head of the crime prevention unit for the police department. His name, he's very famous. When there was a robbery in New York, a break-in any apartment or a store, he's the one that came, and he devised, the first one in the United States, he devised a way of finding out if somebody picked the lock. Takes out the cylinder and he looks for scrapings. I mean, he really knew about locks. So he was teaching how to pick a lock to show the people at the seminar how easy it is. They got to get a better lock, and don't rely on your neighborhood locksmith. But while I used to go in every hour or a half hour when the speaker was changing, I would introduce the speaker. I was the MC. I was the planner. It was my seminar, but I didn't speak. But I just kept introducing one. So in the afternoon, I introduced the great lock picker. His show is about 45 to 50 minutes. He's really fantastic. But that was like in the afternoon, about 3:30. It turns out in any big city, if there's no news, nothing going on, nobody getting murdered, nobody big robbery, the afternoon, evening news have nothing to talk about. They look at what the organizations are having shows, and then everything is quiet. They go to some show, and they saw this thing on security at the Commodore on 42nd Street. So every radio station, ABC, NBC, CBS, and Fox, the 4 big stations showed up. They had nothing else to talk about. So they didn't want to wait for the lockpicker to get off the stage, and I'm the one that ran it. So they said, you got to speak. So I took a little lock set that the speaker made for me as a favor, because I got him on these speaking engagements, and I showed the people from the TV stations how to pick a lock, because everybody was in the room. I was the only one outside willing to talk to them, and they all wanted to get the hell out of there. So Gay Pressman is channel 5. He goes on at 10, and the other 3 channels, 2, 4, and 7, go on at 11. So they got all done. I did it 4 times, and when I was picking, the funny one was the one from CBS is a former cop, and when I was speaking and picking, he said, you don't know. He said, stop. They stopped the camera. He said, okay, Charlie, you just got to picking, and you're going to do it again. And this time, whatever you say, you can talk, but it's not being recorded, because at night, I and the rest of us here will do a voiceover and explain where you are at the real estate board, Charlie Schnabolk. So you can say anything you want, but just do it for about a minute. So we went back, and I said, hey, his name was Chris Borgen. Borgen, you're full of shit. I don't even know how you got that job. He said, Schnabel, keep your fucking mouth shut, because I know you know what the hell you're doing. And you can actually see it on his mouth. So I called everybody up, because he's going to be on at 11 o'clock. But meanwhile, the 10 o'clock one went on, picking locks, and the senior citizens in New York City watch the 10 o'clock news, and they go to bed at 10:30, just before they get the weather. So I get the older people at 10 o'clock, and they are nervous. I showed how you can pick it in 2 minutes, and the phone calls came into the the TV station. That was Channel 5, the pressman, and they went on about 15 minutes to 11. They were almost done, to apologize for me and showing it so easy. And tomorrow night, we're going to have the police commissioner here. He's going to come on, and he's going to show you it's not that bad. They had to apologize for me and put on the police commissioner next day. But I really got a lot, and everybody liked the publicity we got out of it. And I did make a point that it is easy to pick locks. A lot of groups called me because of that Fox News at 10 o'clock, and they were very big groups and very prestigious. One of them was the Republican Club, Women's Club of New York, which are all blue-haired ladies with a lot of money and mansions on Sutton Place and Fifth Avenue, and they want to know what they could do to make their house safer after seeing me on television. And what I didn't know is that when I talk with a straight face, and these senior citizen ladies do not have a sense of humor, and this is what happened. Here's what I told them. I said, first of all, you can do it very inexpensively. All you do is get your super or the custodial staff in your building, or even the local locksmith, but you can make it cheaper if you have your own staff. Go to Home Depot and buy 8 locks. They're average around $15 to $20, so it doesn't cost more. And tell the super or the locksmith to put in the 8 locks around the existing lock you have, so you'll have 9 locks. So that looks really like a fortress, so most lock pickers will not even tempt it. But the more brazen ones, and the more will notice that there are cheap locks, and they can pick them all. So what you do in the morning is arbitrarily, randomly, and different every day, lock 4 of them, like the 1st, the 5th, the 8th, and the 7th, and the next day the 1, 2, 3. Just lock a different system each day you go out. In other words, when you leave in the morning, 4 of the locks are open and 4 are locked. So when this lock picker comes, who's not the brightest man in the world, he's going to do. If he's timid, he'll walk away, and but if he knows and he recognizes the cheap locks, he knows he can pick them. But what he doesn't know is you left 4 of them open. So when he picks the 8 locks, he is actually opening 4 and locking 4, and he's going to be an hysterical crying right on your stoop when you come home because he can't figure it out. He tried it 15 times, and he keeps locking the doors. So that's how I solved the problem. And now even though I'm laughing at it, the women at one of the meetings, that Republican club meeting, all of them went out and bought 8 locks. The local locksmith made a fortune. A last word on seminars. I ran one a year after that previous one I just showed you, and including lock picking, that I netted over $100,000 for one day. The seminar was conducted by myself and my entire staff that consisted of my wife and my mother-in-law as the receptionist at the seminars. Okay, now with that seminar at the real estate board, I realized there's money in these seminars, but more importantly, there's a lot of money for me because that's how I get exposure. And hopefully people, not only do I make money on their tuition for the seminar, but they will hire me for a security study. So these seminars was really important. But I didn't know you could make as much as I'm going to tell you about. Right after the real estate board, the New York City Building Department passed a new law called Local Law 5. Now people say, what do you mean by law? Well, it's an ordinance just for the city of New York. When they find out there's a problem, like a building collapses, and they want to make the foundation higher, they'll pass Local Law 2 107, which means you got to have a 10-foot foundation because of the problems. So around the early 70s, when I just started in business with that real estate board experience, I found that this local law 5 was bothering all the builders in New York because the city passed this law to make every building owner over a 30-story building to put in more communication systems, more pressure in the corridors. It was just $1 million on every building, and the real estate people are up in arms, but they didn't understand the code. But I never heard of it either. And my friend that I showed you before, who put me in business, Lenny Goldstein, my classmate, he told me about this law and how everybody was upset about it, but no one's doing anything about it. So I had to go to a meeting of heating and ventilating, air conditioning people that meet once a month that usually have about 10 people show up. And this time I went to the meeting and there were 100 there because there was somebody from the fire department was talking about local law 5. I never heard of it. It's April, I never heard of the code. And everybody in the room is panicking over the cost. So I decided right then and there to run a seminar and explain local law 5, even though I didn't know what the hell it was myself. So I had to get speakers and I had to get a sponsor. So I called up Building Magazine out of Chicago that wrote here this article. They have an article I wrote in the Building Magazine, and that's the cover of the magazine. So they knew me well. You know, they got a good response on I think I wrote 3 articles. And I said to them that this new local law 5, which they never heard of, I said, it's a sensation. I said, I want you to sponsor it, your magazine. I'll do all the work, and we'll split it. And they said, sure. You know, and I said, that includes the mailing and the brochure, and you pay for that and the stamps, and then we'll pay for the hotel and whatever else costs, and we split it. And I said, fine. So you got to, when you do a seminar, you got to have all the printing done 6 weeks before the seminar, at least, 8 to 6 weeks before, so people get a chance to read it, but not too long before, because then they'll forget about it as you get closer. So they said they had a readership in New York City of 3,000. Just New York City, because that's all I care about. That's all the local law was, New York City. So I said, well, 3,000 is enough. We get 10% is a lot. So we'll get, 30, 40 people. We'll make it, profitable just for that. And you get exposure, and so will I. So I got the list from the local law 5 that wrote it, the building department, and they had an engineering firm write it, Siskin Hennessy, uptown New York, and the fire department. It was a cooperation between the 2 agencies, the engineering firm and the fire department. So the first thing I did is I have the sponsor, and I haven't got a room yet, but I have to find speakers. So I go to the fire department, and I ask to see the assistant commissioner. Now he's the highest career employee in the fire department. The commissioner is appointed by the mayor and fired by the mayor, but not the assistant commissioner. That's civil service, and he's well known. His name is O'Hare, and he's been a career fireman, and he's second, but he was on the committee that wrote Local Law 5. So I got in to see him by telling the secretary I just came from Siskin Hennessy, and I spoke to the president of the company, and he suggested I come down here to get the assistant commissioner, to speak at a seminar on Local Law 5. Completely bluffing. So I met him, and he said he'll do it. I said it's going to be in a hotel in New York. We're putting it together. And so I got on the subway, and I went uptown to the engineering firm that wrote the code, and I told the secretary I'm here from the fire department, and I got an assistant commissioner who told me to speak to the president. Long story short, I got him on the program. And I got 3 other people who were engineers knowledgeable on that law, which I still didn't even know what the law was. And I go up to the Hilton Hotel on 6th Avenue. Now that I have, everything set, the printing is ready to go out, and I got the speakers now. So the Hilton said, how big a room you want? I said, well, 30, 40, 50. They said, fine, we'll give you the suite, and it's so much for the lunch. You're going to be there all day, right? I said, yes, the rental room and the lunch. I said, all right. And I said, it's going to be a fire commissioner. They said, great, it's great publicity for the hotel. So the mail goes out. And within the first 3 days, I get 80 replies they're coming. I call up the Hilton. I said, how about a room for 100? They said, okay, we'll move it. Don't worry about it. So the seminar is in September, and the mailing went out in July. So as time goes by, funny things happen. The fire commissioner gets fired by Mayor Beam for doing something bad. And my assistant commissioner becomes, in July, before my seminar, the fire commissioner. I now have the fire commissioner as my keynote speaker. I mean, just a fluke. And now the mail gets bigger and bigger. Anyway, long story short, the Hilton tells me about 3 weeks before the meeting, they can't give me any more room. They're giving me the grand ballroom with 300 people in it. I said, holy Christ. I said, I'm going to fill that plus some. He said, I can't give you any more. That's it. So I could have had 400 or 500. Now, each of them are paying me like $500 to go to the seminar, like the greatest speakers in the world. Now, that's like $150,000. So you got to pay Hilton for the lunch and incidentals and so forth. I had to pay for the printing. So I ended up with like $100,000. The magazine gets 50, and I got 50. And my only employees that I have in my company, I just started my company, my receptionist at the seminar, who gave out the tags with the name tags, which the night before we wrote everybody's name down, all 300 of them. And my two employees were my wife and her mother, my mother-in-law. And people thought I had a company because I had my two secretaries there. I had no company. I just did the seminar for $150,000 in one day. So there was a little bit of ending to it. So I realized that at seminars also, I'm learning about seminars, and I ran many, because beside having a sponsor and good speakers, you got to keep them in the room after 4 o'clock. So what I did is I called up 3 big companies, Honeywell, ADT, and Johnson Controls. They're all in the security industry. And I explained to their regional manager, I'm running this seminar, and I'm not charging you anything, and you can have a table at 4:30 to 6 at the Hilton Hotel where you give out your brochures. You're not going to speak, but you got to pay for the liquor. And the liquor between, I have 3 of you. I told them the names of the other 2. And I said, between it costs you like $500 a piece, like $1,500 for that 1.5 hour drink. And giving out free drinks, you're going to keep everybody there, which what happened. So I had a free cocktail party. It didn't cost me anything. Everybody stayed. It was the greatest seminar ever given at a local law 5, which I still don't understand, which I don't even think they follow it anymore. But what happened is about 3 weeks later, because of the fire commissioner, the Mr. Commissioner, O'Hare, walks into that room, and I told him there were going to be 30, 40 people, and he sees 300 people. He calls up the magazine, and he says he's going to sue him because they didn't give him a speaking fee. So the publisher calls me up. He says, they're extorting from me. They want $10,000. I said, hey, I'm not giving him a cent. He's a civil servant, and he's supposed to do that for nothing. So, and I understand they gave him the $10,000, but I didn't. I kept my 50. That was my first 2 years in business running seminars. Amazing story. During my career as a consultant, beside putting up alarm systems, I invented and developed my own systems. And I was really unique in the business because I made my own equipment in my little shop, my factory in New York City. And people would just come with special conditions that they couldn't find a product that would work, and I would make it maybe once. But so that led to a lot of interesting projects. So the most interesting one was that after I spoke at some seminar, I got a call from Chicago from Hugh Hefner, who saw me on a TV show where I talked about security. I forgot, this is about 1983, 84, so I forget where he saw me. And it seemed that he at that time had 8 or 9 hotels and Playboy clubs, which were bars, but he had big hotels. And what he used to do is, like a lot of hotel owners do today, and forever, they buy paintings and stick them on the walls of the hotels, and sometimes in the rooms. But in the hotels that he owned, the Playboy Club, it was a very colorful place with bunnies and big bar action. And he put the paintings, and he specialized in a particular painter called Leroy Neiman, which was like sports figures that were running and stuff like that. And he would put a whole bunch of them on the back of the bar in the 7, 8 hotels. Maybe there were 8, I think. And they were millions of dollars when you put them all together. And it was hung behind the bar, above where the liquor bottles are. But at night, you can climb over the bar and take them off the wall, which people were doing. Now, the reason they can do it is you can't lock the bar in a hotel. People walk by it at night to go to their room. So the bar is open. They may put the bottles of liquor away, but the room is open. So the drunks who were sitting there, not necessarily art thieves, instead of stealing the ashtray or a coaster for a drink with the name of the hotel, they would take the painting, thinking it was a cheap painting, as a souvenir. They were stealing souvenirs worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. So he said he wants me to protect the paintings. And I didn't tell him that I've never been in a museum before. I know nothing about paintings. So he told me he's assigning me to the Playboy Club in Great Gorge, New Jersey, which is about an hour from the Washington Bridge. And they have a security director there, and it's a 500-room fancy hotel, very expensive with entertainment and so forth. So I go down there, introduce myself to the security director, and he knew I was coming, and I started on this big project. Big meaning I didn't know what to do. How do you protect a painting in an open room? You know, in a museum, it's the same situation during the daytime. They're not protected. They protect the room at night. But you can't do that. You can do that in a museum, and that's why museums' paintings are stolen in the daytime. In a hotel, they're stolen at night because you can't put an alarm system in at night like you can in a museum. Anyways, a little confusing. So I worked with the security director, very, very bright guy, and we can't find anything commercially available to protect a painting from being stolen anytime in a 24-hour period, day or night. So I start to visit New York City museums, 1983, 84. And no museum in New York or anywhere in the country, but New York is where I went, about 8 of them, on Museum Row on Fifth Avenue. No one admitted that they had paintings stolen, because if you admitted that a painting was stolen, you couldn't get people dying and leaving their paintings to the museum or having a traveling exhibit. People would not bring their painting to your museum if they thought it would be stolen. So everybody lied, and it was the biggest lie in history. The 5th largest category of stolen material is drugs, guns, money laundering, and museum paintings. It's in the billions. They steal so many paintings. And today it's even more, because in '84 a painting that went for $10,000 was what was made the front page. Today they're selling paintings for $100 million. So it's really worse today. So if you're going to steal anything, here's a little bit of advice: don't rob a bank. The average bank robber gets $1,000 and goes to jail. But if you rob a painting, you never go to jail, because the jury looks at the painting that's worth $20 million and says, my daughter just bought one in Costco for $18. It looks nicer than that. They never send the thief to jail. So anyway, that's how I started. And we couldn't find anything. And I couldn't put an alarm system in the building because it was open 24 hours a day, the hotel. So what we decided to do is to make our own system. He helped me. What I did is I got something like, this is not exactly what it is, but it's like a garage door opener. You know, you have a little transmitter in your car and you push the button and the garage door 30 feet away will open. So what I did is I got a thing like a garage door opener, only it's electronic, like a garage door opener. And I put a wire on it, and I put a shock sensor that you put on windows when you break it. I'm bending down to pick up a frame. Here's the painting, and my transmitter is there. We paste it on the painting in the back, and we put a wire from the painting to a shock sensor. You find that, you can see this in the brochure behind me. And what you did is, if you touched the painting, the shock sensor would move, transmit a signal, and the signal frequency is like, when I say garage door opener, everybody on the block has a garage door opener, but when you push the button on house 1, it sends out a code 832, and that door opens. The next house has a code 789. That door opens. So every painting had a different code. So when it lit up down, it's a transmitter, remember, just like a garage door opener. When it lit up the panel downstairs in the control room, it would light up 783. That's the Picasso on the 5th floor. And that was my invention. I didn't patent it, because in security, you don't patent anything, because other people will see what it is, because you got to give the drawing, and also becomes obsolete in 2 years. There's another invention. But what you do is you trademark it. So I owned the trademark Art Guard. It became the most famous painting protection system in the world. And I did the Louvre, and I did the English Museum. I did the whole world, but almost every museum in the United States had it. And I sold it by just word of mouth. I never advertised. And that's even an interesting story. So this system worked in the Playboy Club. I don't want to jump the gun. And you have to put them in all the Playboy clubs. And I was now selling it to museums. And you have to found out about it, because I got my fee. It was a huge fee. But he said since I invented it on his contract, he wanted a piece of it. I never answered his lawyer letter, and I never heard from it again. But I guess he forgot, whatever. I mean, he knew it was a hot item. And the way I sold it is only by word of mouth, from the museum directors telling each other. And I was selling it, and this is a great story for anybody wanting to go into business, how you price an item. It depends on the market and the mentality of the buyer. Museums are mainly run by stupid people. I mean, they're low paid, and they're buying $100 million paintings. So they're not really in the economic cycle of everybody. They think differently. So anyway, I start to make it in my shop, and I make it for about $25, all the parts and the labor, because there's nothing in it. It's just a little transmitter. A garage door opener is $20 in Sears Roebuck. So I'm making it, and I'm selling it to the museums for $125. Great markup, I thought. And I was selling a few of them. I wasn't really jumping around. And people, they called me when they got around to worrying about security. But the point is that I was happy selling it for $125. And then I got in touch through a friend of mine, told me about a group at MIT in Boston, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. In the 1930s, they started a program with one man. Now it has like 3 people. And they want to introduce their alumni, who are brilliant engineers, to business people, because they'd have no business acumen. They had no way of handling all the genius. They would invent things, but then not selling it properly because they had no business experience. So what happens is the MIT Forum, that was the name of the group, or the one man in Boston, he would get people, alumni in different cities, like 8 big cities, Chicago, LA, New York, and they would be an alumnus or worked in the business field, even though he was an MIT graduate. He would know bankers, and they would once a month for 10 months a year take a product that comes up to them and then have an arrangement with bankers would review it and give advice to the inventor. So I even though I didn't go to MIT, I went to school equivalent to it. I applied, and I was interviewed in New York by the vice president of Merrill Lynch, and he liked the idea, and he was going to show it at a meeting where I would introduce my product to bankers, how I can sell it better or more efficiently or make more profit, whatever. So I had to prepare 10 marketing plans, which I had a friend of mine make up, what I tended to do with the product, how much it cost me to make, and how to submit it to the Merrill Lynch guy. And he gave it, he didn't give out all the 10, he kept 5. He gave 5 out to bankers, and they reviewed it for a month. And then I make my presentation in front of 100 people, including the panel of 5 that read my marketing presentation. And in the audience are all bankers. They're all venture capitalists and so forth. And they show up every month when they see another product. So the panelists reviewed it and said, it's a good product, but limited value. And so they weren't thrilled over it because they didn't notice. Nobody knew the security industry, and they didn't know it as well as I did. It's a hot item. Anyway, then they open it up to discussion from the audience, and one banker stands up and says, "What do you sell it for?" I said, $125. It's in my report. He says, "What does it cost you?" I said, $25. 5 times. He says, "Well, you're in the museum field, and they are known to be very inaccurate about finance. You got to sell it for more money. If you want to sell it, because they think it's a Japanese knockoff, you got to charge more money." And take my advice. I know the business, but I'm not going to invest in the product because it's limited to how many museums there are. The next day, true story, everybody in the industry knows this, I raised the price to $500. The next day on my brochure, I just changed the price. I couldn't make them fast enough. In 1 year, I made $1 million, which I would have made only like 100,000. I couldn't make them. They thought it was the greatest thing because it's $500. They thought it was a piece of crap at 125. Great story. Now the story always has some, I'm a millionaire. I'm going to sell all over the country, all over the world. No. Every time there's something good, something bad happens. And now before I tell you the bad, let me tell you some of the incidents. I'm going to show you now where I protected the testicles on a deer in Las Vegas for the State Department of Cultural Affairs. And I also protected the crotch on a dress that Marilyn Monroe wore to the inauguration of JFK, which is in the Hewlett-Packard Museum in New York City. After I invented the Art Guard Museum Protection System. I became the darling of that particular industry of museums, because either they like you or they don't like you, meaning if they accept one vendor, they tell each other all over the country, and he becomes, when I say a vendor, he makes frames, or he makes some paintings, or equipment, or brushes, whatever. If they like you, they tell everybody. If they don't like you, you're dead. Lucky for me, I really got some good friends at the Chicago Museum who told everybody about my art card, and I was the hero of the industry, meaning I got all of the 100 largest museums in 1 year with that invention. And I was speaking at all their museum conventions also. They're strange people. I mean, they buy $100 million paintings for their museum, and yet they pay their curators very little. And the curators are usually have fathers that are rich, and they have PhDs in archaeology and spend a year digging at the Sphinx in India, but or Egypt. I mean, it's a funny group of people. They're very close-knit. So 1 year, I got invited out to the national convention after doing a lot of seminars and local conventions for the museum industry. And they have about 5,000 people show up in Las Vegas that year. And it isn't because there's a lot of museums there. The museums bring a lot of people. You may have 200 museums represented, but they each bring 50 people, that kind of thing. And it was a 5-day convention, and I spoke on the first day about security in museums, and I, of course, show my famous art guard. And it was very, very popular. Now, after that meeting, people come up, got my cards and so forth, and I get assignments. They sell the equipment because of these seminars, because I never advertise. And 2 men come up to me, and they're from the Nevada Department of Cultural Affairs. They're in charge of the museums in the state of Nevada. Beside Las Vegas, and any big city has little museums. And when I say little museums, there are 200 big ones, like I just told you, but there's 16,000 museums in the United States that have toilet seats. There's one in Texas that has 500 toilet seats. Some have beer cans. They're called museums, but they're ones we're familiar with on the top 150 or 200, and they're big enough to have a security director who also shows up at these shows. And they approached me, and very shyly, one of them was giggling, but he calmed down. He said, look, they want to hire me, and they want me to do it this week. So I said, well, it's going to go back in a couple of days. I said, we'll pay you to stay, and we'll pay you a fee. We just built a museum about a mile outside of the main part of the Strip in Las Vegas, and it's in the desert where they have like rocks and stuffed animals. It's 2 little rooms, and somebody left their money to build it, the state, so it's controlled by the state, with one receptionist in the front room, and each room is about 40 feet by 40 feet, a 1-story building, and they're having trouble at the museum, and they'd like to hire me. And I said, what do I have to do? Well, they have one particular exhibit they want to show me, and they said, come on out, I'll make it worth your while. So we drove out, took about a half hour to get out of town, which meant not too many people visit this museum, not gamblers anyway. And they showed me the 2 rooms that had about 10 or 12 exhibits in each room. And in the back room, away from the receptionist, was a little stand with a stuffed deer in it, where you can come right up to the stand and reach in and grab the testicles of the deer. I said, who would do that? Then I realized when they talked about it, gamblers are known to be very, very superstitious, because they gamble, you think you're going to be luck, and not luck. You try different moves when you throw the dice. And at a crap table, the longer you throw the dice, the more likely you're going to win. I mean, if you throw the dice and you crap out right away, crapping out means you threw a 7 after you threw a number. So that's called crapping out, and you don't want to do that too fast. So anyway, because I'm a very big crap player. So I go to the museum, and he takes me in the back room where the stuffed deer is, as you can see in this picture. And sure enough, you can reach in and grab the testicles, which I never thought of as a luck symbol. But let me tell you about that later, what I did there. And they paid me, I thought when it was asking me what I want, I thought quickly I was down $3,800 in the 2 days I was there. So I said $3,800 plus expenses for 3 days to do it, to design it, and get somebody in town to put the system in. They said, done deal. They're from the state capital. I think it's in Sparks, Nevada. And they're going to be around all week, and they'll cut me the check. but they want to report, and they want the system to stop this thing. It's dangerous, and it's also ripping the testicles off the damn deer. So I took the job, and what I did is pretty simple. I put a motion detector, so when you reach your hand across, it sets off an alarm, not a loud one. It sets off, the camera is above it, and there's a monitor at the one guy's reception desk, and it makes a beep, so he looks at the camera, and he can see the man grabbing it. So what I also installed, all of this in one day for a local alarm installer, a voice synthesizer. But I didn't even need that because we made it simple, because there was never crowds, so the receptionist always had a chance to pick up the microphone, and I had a speaker in the second room. And as soon as he saw the man reaching over, he would say, "Hey, cut that out, you son of a bitch. What do I grab your balls?" And that was the third day I put that in. Amazingly, it stopped dead. The men, 4 times it happened the first day, and then never again. I heard the word got out. They would run out the exit door into the desert. They probably died of starvation and not having water. So I got interested in the actual statistics. Does grabbing the testicle doesn't mean anything, and I'm a compulsive crap player. So of course I tried it, but I didn't have a number of days to test it really accurately, but it did somehow affect. Now, I also had 3 more days at the museum convention, so everybody knew me now because I gave the first day speech, and then I told them what I was doing. I was on assignment while the convention was on, and a lot of people volunteered to help me because they thought this would be a great statistic to publicize. And we did the testicle one, and there were 42. I wasn't the only one, but did maybe half of them. I tried it 42 times, and over the 3 days, and the average roll was about 7. So I mean, I could have done that without I could have washed my hands and did that. But the other one that was interesting, and the people volunteered to do it because a lot of them had their family with them. The diaper theory, which is worldwide for centuries. If you touch a wet diaper, you throw the dice, and as you can see, that isn't much better than the testicle. So that kills that theory. But the most interesting one is if you squeeze a naked breast, depending on the color of the woman's hair, there is a real trend. For instance, if it's a blonde with short hair, we did it, I only could get 12 people to do it for me. It was terrible. I mean, the average was really terrible. And even with long hair, it was worse. If you touch the breast of a blonde with long hair, forget about it. You're going to lose a fortune. Don't do it. But if you do brunettes with short hair, you win each time. And if you do with long hair, you make a fortune. And that statistics is what I'm going to leave to the world after I retire.